How did the Badgers beat Bama week 3? We got Brian Smith on the show. We're going to talk about that matchup and what he thinks could play out. Locked on Badgers. Let's go.
You are Locked On Badgers, your daily podcast on the Wisconsin Badgers. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
What is going on, Badger fans? Welcome to Locked On Badgers, your team every single day. I'm your host, Ryan, part of the Locked On Podcast Network. Really do appreciate everybody spending a little bit of time with us here. Today's episode brought to you by FanDuel. Listen, summer's long. There's not a ton of sports, but FanDuel's hooking you up all summer long. Boosts are bonus daily. Head over to FanDuel.com to get started. We got our guy, Brian Smith, on the show, Locked On's Recruiting Insider. And we're just starting here, not just Recruiting Insider. Not a lot of people watch more ball than you do, man. How did the Badgers beat Bama week 3?
I think the first thing is Tyler Van Dyke doesn't do what he did in front of me last year when I watched him at the University of Miami, and that's throw it to the other team. He's got to reduce turnovers. He had like 10 or 11 picks or something last year. And then I think they actually have to find a way to run the ball, but not just traditional bad. You're not going to just run the ball, Bama. Last year, Auburn ran the ball, but they pulled out every rabbit out of the hat in terms of eye candy there was, and they were using the quarterback. Well, Tyler's not a runner. So they're going to have to come up with a reverse or a couple other plays, maybe trick play, fake punt. They need explosives out of the blue some way, shape, or form. And I think if they do that, they can get into the second half. You never know what Milroe is going to do from game to game. Like, he can be on fire or he can be terrible. If the Badgers' deep secondary doesn't give up bombs, which that's the one thing Jalen does pretty well, they have a chance. But guys like Kobe Prentice, et cetera, are really, really good. And that gives me a little pause. Like, I'm looking at Prentice's stats right now. This is one of those twitchy guys. If they can keep him in front, they can get Kendrick Law to stay in front. Like, he's another guy, really yoked up guy from Louisiana. They got a chance. But obviously Bama has more talent. So getting through that first half without the turnovers is my biggest concern.
Talking about Milroe, it feels like the national media is a little all over the board with him. Obviously, a big-time runner, physical. He can do some really super unique things. He can run to the left and then jack a 60-yard bomb on the dime, but also maybe not a traditional pocket quarterback. It struggles with accuracy at times. Like, what is your feel on him?
I mean, I've seen him live, and I've seen him on TV a number of times. When I was at the Alabama-Auburn game last year, and I walked out the field and I saw him over there throwing, I'm like, that looks like a prize fighter. Like, he's that kind of yoked. It's just muscles popping out of muscles. But, like, he doesn't always read the field the same. Like, everything he wants to get past the safety, or he throws a check down. Like, he all but like the middle of the field, it's like he's blind. He can't see what's going on. He doesn't even try most of the time. So they got to bait him into some throws like that and keep him inside the hashes. And again, Kendrick Law, Kobe Prentice, anybody they throw. The screen game is what scares me, because if you get one guy that's out of position, they got speed, they will score. And that's how you can change a game. You take the ball out of his hands, but it doesn't matter. Like, it's just, you can't allow the quick game to beat you. I don't know if he'll do that, though, because he goes through spurts where he's off. Like the Michigan game, I know they were a good defense. Dude, he threw for 116 yards. Mm-hmm. That is awful. So once he gets down on himself a little bit, it can go in the tank. Got to start fast on defense.
Talk to me. What is your perception on the roster turnover at Bama? They lost quite a few people, but how many of those are difference makers, though? I don't know. What is your perception nationally?
Well, they lost the best safety in the SEC. He was a true freshman and led Bama with 107 tackles. Unfortunately for the Badgers, he transferred to Ohio State.
Yep.
But so ironic. But at the same time, they don't have quite as much talent, and Nick Saban's not coaching the defense in any way, shape, or form. Keep those points. I'll bring that up at the end of this season and explain why. They still got Malachi Moore, who's kind of the glue of their secondary. They got Deontay Lawson's at Mike. He's a really good player. Quindarius Robinson, they got a fifth-year senior that's kind of like their edge guy. LT Overton, who was like a national top 20 kid as D lineman's a backup. I mean, they're so loaded up front. It's insane. But who's going to play where, how much? Their nose guard's probably the biggest concern. or both of them, depending on how they do it. And I'm not sure what they'll try to do against Wisconsin early. Both their DTs might be pure nose guards, guys that are like 320 and up. I mean, and both of them were national recruits, one's from Florida, one's from Mississippi. Tim Smith and Jaheim Otis, when I met him, I thought he was going to put me between two slices of bread and make me a snack. He was 370 or more when I met him, and he could still move. You got to only create so many people that big. I'm worried about the Badgers being in 2nd and 8. That doesn't work against Western Kentucky, let alone Alabama. So that's my biggest thing. Offensively, they got Proctor back. Their interior O-line might be the best in the country. That's not good because their running back room is Alabama. They lost Rodell Williams, who's a really good guy, and their main guy against Georgia, and they still have like 4 really good running backs. Man, come on. It's crazy. So there's nothing about them that says that you're going to have an easy road in any one direction. I'm just not sure they know how to mesh yet. If this game was game 9, I'd be far, far more worried about than game 3.
Well, let's talk about that because you and I have kind of talked off air a little bit before on this. The Badgers are getting them in a good spot in terms of getting Bama. Like there's never an easy time to get them, but week 3, they're getting them in Madison. How does that? We talked last year all the time about Fickell. You're really high on Fickell, but hey, it takes a year or 2 to get a new coaching system in place to get everything fully tuned up. There's going to be some growing pains here. Is that the road for the Badgers to upset Bama here?
I mean, they have to get something, a freebie. If they don't get a freebie touchdown of some kind in this game, they're not going to get a dub. That's my opinion, meaning a block punt, interception return, and Bama knows that. I think they'll play it pretty close to the vest and then throw a few bombs because they don't think, nor do I, Wisconsin's going to take 75 yards and go down the field 12 plays. So they need some freebies there, and Bama might give it to them. I don't know if Kalen DeBoer wants to go back. He's had a few guys similar to what the quarterback is at Alabama. But at the same time, like after what he had the last couple of years, that has got to be brutal. Now, he's still got receivers. He's still got guys. They got multiple guys that will get drafted, etc. But they don't have the same size. Like they were massive at receiver at Washington. 6'2", 6'3" guys running down the field, but someone playing slot, moving around. It was just nightmare. I think you're going to see them be a little more conservative with the screen game. The question also is, will Bama run the quarterback? He's freak athlete, but he doesn't like to run, which Jalen Milroe might be the best pure athlete on Alabama's roster. But he doesn't like to run. If he goes and it commits to the run game, Alabama's offense will be insane. I just think he wants to avoid injuries. That guy thinks he's going to be a pocket quarterback in the NFL. He's not. But that's what he thinks. As long as he's not running, so if he starts getting 20-yard gains and stuff on scrambling at Bama's, this game could get ugly because they're going to move the ball some. Red zone defense, you got to hold them to field goals. Maybe need to get, a sack, strip fumble. They need something like that on one of those drives. So all the little things that you think about, the coaches you see on film complaining about in practice, hustle to the ball, might be a fumble and stuff. This game above any other they play, they'll need it because Bama will have more speed, more size, more depth.
What does your gut tell you how this game will play out?
I think that it'll be close through about 3 quarters and Bama will pull away at the end. They got more depth. I think that's a fair assessment. My guess, I don't know what the line is, but I'd guess 12, 10, something like that, because I just think they'll wear Wisconsin out. Wisconsin would, like in 2 years, this game would be totally different because of their depth. Like we're going to talk about some of their D linemen and stuff. They don't have the same depth. And that's the other reason playing game 3 is better. Like game 9, Wisconsin sustains an injury up front, O-line, D-line. It's not the same as it is at Bama, Bama can eat that up a little easier. But game 3, that's your advantage. If you're pretty healthy, and I assume, have they had any guys hurt in the trenches off that
No, they're pretty solid right now. They're one of the few that it feels like haven't had one of those weird freak injuries.
Okay, because like Texas lost 2 of their running backs already. I mean, that is rough. Yep. So, I mean, one of them's an NFL player, and, he gets an ACL. So, if they can stay healthy to that game, obviously Camp Randall is one of the most incredible environments in all of the country, regardless of sport, really. I think they got a chance, but they need Milroe to be a little off, and you need one of those plays, especially early, to make the Badger faithful feel like, okay, we're in this. If they're down 10-0 and Bama's driving and early in the second quarter, that place will be a morgue. So they have to do well in that first quarter.
Give me your big picture. I know we've talked about him before, but as the season starts to wrap up, Badger fans have gotten pretty excited about Tyler Van Dyke. He has looked pretty good in practice. Listen, we all know he's got the big arm. Like, he showcased the big arm.
Absolutely.
He's been running pretty well too. He's been pulling the ball down and actually being a little bit more of a threat with his size and his mobility. Like, big picture, can he be the guy that exceeds expectations this year?
I don't know what the expectations are for him. And with Wisconsin's receiver, like what Miami had at receiver, I mean, Jacoby George and Xavier Estrepo. Between them, they had 1,900 and some yards, like 1,880 or something like that. I don't know if Wisconsin's got a guy that he can trust. Like, Jacoby George scored 3 touchdowns against Texas A&M. Who's their go-to guy? I'm openly asking, because he needs somebody that he can trust, because he's a deep ball guy. If they don't have that, that concerns me, because he gets a little antsy in the pocket because he's been hurt and hit enough. I get it. He got hurt like 2-3 times at Miami. So I know they usually have a pretty good line and all that, but they don't have a go-to guy. I'm worried that he's going to chuck it too much. That was his problem last year. Georgia Tech game.
Yeah.
The reason that got to that kneel-down situations, he played terrible in it. They should have won by 20 points. He throws late down the middle against cover 3. It's like, what are you doing? So
what if the go-to guy's a slot receiver?
That's fine, because Xavier was the slot receiver. He had 1,000 yards. Now, he's a dude. Like, he is a dog. I don't know who the kid is for Wisconsin, but he had a bunch of catches last year. But that's a different quarterback now. So I assume they're trying to get those two on the same page. And he catch 70 balls last year?
Yeah, that was Will Pauling, 74. And he's a dude.
That's a lot of catches. He better be, yeah.
Yeah, tough, quick. I kind of wonder sometimes if it works as well with a guy like Van Dyke, who generally wants to push the ball down the field. But Pauling's going to create separation and get open.
The other thing is that'll open up the tight ends and the running backs and stuff like that. You got to play off somebody, and it's really hard to double the slot with somebody that's a true coverage guy. So if you take your safety on that slot, then you both sides of the field, if you've got receivers outside of them or both one-on-one, that's rough. The safety, the other safety could possibly get over depending on how you're playing the field. And if not, if he's shading, you run the ball towards there's a lot of things you can play to that advantage. They've got to find a way, though, for him to be vertical, to beat quality teams like Bama. He's not good against zone and 5 and 10 yarding you to death. He's just not. If he was, he'd be in the NFL right now. The arm, the height, he's a nice guy. I've met him. He's a nice guy. All that. If you're conservative and play cloud coverage, things like that, kind of like Wisconsin did sometimes, or Iowa's covered too, and you're really good at it, he is not patient. That's when he gets himself in trouble.
Oh, that's great stuff. All right, we're going to take a quick break, come back. We're going to talk about Xavier Ukponu, the newest defensive lineman commit. I know Brian's going to like that. We haven't had a chance to talk about that commitment since it happened. That's coming up next on Locked On Badgers. Today's episode is brought to you by my great friends over at FanDuel.com, the official sportsbook of Major League Baseball, the Locked On Podcast Network, and fans everywhere that are trying to get a little bit more sports out of the summer. There's not a lot of sports in the summer, so you got to squeeze every little drop out of them, like lemon at a lemonade stand, and that's what FanDuel.com is here for. Futures, parlays, teaser spreads. If you're like me, you're going to go take the over in Wisconsin like I have for 3, 4, 5, 6 years in a row. It doesn't always work out, but I'm going to head over to FanDuel.com. I'm going to bang that over because I think they legitimately are going to beat that 7. It's also a great spot if you're into Major League Baseball, the NFL starting up. They have everything you need there, from your futures, your parlays, your teasers, your spreads. It's fast, it's easy, it's simple. As I always say, do it responsibly, but a great place to spice up your sports weekend. And they're hooking up people all summer long with Boost Our Bonus daily over at FanDuel.com. You will not regret it. It is the official sportsbook of the Locked On Podcast Network and the official sportsbook of Major League Baseball. Today's episode is also brought to you by our good friends over at LinkedIn. Listen, we get it. Every hire, every relationship. I almost said every hire is a high stakes wager, but every relationship you enter into is a high stakes wager. LinkedIn is here to help make sure your professional relationships, your professional network is legit, top notch, 5-star. That's why they are the official hiring platform of the Locked On Podcast Network and one of the best places you could possibly ever go. I have gotten work because of LinkedIn. That's how I got my first real IT job after I got out of the Navy. It was through a LinkedIn job posting. My company uses LinkedIn for the vast majority of the professional marketing, professional advertising, professional newsletters, professional announcements. LinkedIn is awesome. And right now, over at LinkedIn.com, they're helping you find the qualified candidates you want to talk to faster. Post your job for free at LinkedIn.com/LockedOnCollege. That's LinkedIn.com/LockedOnCollege. Post your job for free. Terms and conditions do apply. Let's get Brian back in here. Let's talk Xavier Ukponu. So 2025 defensive lineman coming out of Destin, Texas, about 6'2", 6'3", 290 pounds, good size, looks physical, strong against the run. Thoughts on his film and maybe how that translates?
I still think that he's a kid that, while he's good and he's a guy that can make some inroads for them, this might, I don't know if this is the best way to put it, this might be the guy that you look at them and you say, here's our prototype. He's a little bit of a late bloomer. I met him a couple of years ago, and they knew he was going to be a guy. He's 250, 260 then. But he was new to football, and he was just learning. I don't think he started playing to 8th, 9th grade. And he's got the size, got the width. Here's the traditional Wisconsin defensive tackle, but with a little more twitch, a little more athleticism. You start getting kids like this, especially you get Petway with him, because I think he's going to be really good. You could change your defense. You can change your perception. You can battle against Ohio State easier. You can leave one more guy in coverage because up front you just got more girth. So this is what Wisconsin needs, and I'm not saying they're always going to, for lack of a better term, just murder it up front. But, you know, you got Clayton on the edge and stuff to go with these guys. It's a good compliment. I think this is a good player. Like, he could play at Michigan. He could play at Notre Dame. Like, the other schools that kind of compete with normal, I know he's a Texas kid. In the Midwest, they lose a lot of kids too. I think he could play at those schools. This kind of kid that Harbaugh used to recruit at Michigan. So good pickup for the Badgers and a position of need. It's a D tackle. It has more value than what you see on 247 or on 3 because there just aren't that many guys with that size.
Yeah, that's exactly where I wanted to go next. So you teed it up. He's a mid 3-star, but then you look at the offer list,
Oh, yeah.
But like the teams that have kicked the tires on him, like it's Tennessee, it's Texas A&M, it's Oregon, it's Miami of Florida, like it's Oklahoma, right? This is and I think it speaks to the point you just made. You just can't find that many guys. So even though he's a 3-star in the rankings, like from a scarcity standpoint, with his size and build, he's a 4-star kid almost.
Yeah, like his upside's really high. He's probably a little bit of a boomer bust, but I think because he came from Geyer High School, and I'm sure you're not that familiar, but that's one of the dominant programs in Texas. It's just outside of the Dallas area. If you get kids like that from there, they have that body type, that he's a kid that works hard. I've been around him. You got a higher ceiling with him than what he's ranked. I know it's not a sure bet, but like the Petway kid, nobody even knows he's gained the weight that you and I were talking about before the show. Like, he's going to be a defensive tackle. They've got the size now to compete with Ohio State and Michigan and Penn State moving forward. Now, they need these kind of classes every year, but you need an anchor like him that's your nose guard. You don't have a nose guard against Michigan. You have what happened to them to Penn State last year. What was it? They ran the ball 32 times in a row, something like that. By the way, that's ridiculous. I think that they're going to improve immensely by, I'd say, year 4 of this regime. Like, it's a big roster turnover for what they were trying to run defensively, because they're trying to go ultra aggressive compared to very conservative what they used to do. It takes forever without using the portal. That's just not Wisconsin's thing. So this is the way you do it. It's going to be slower than Badger fans like, but it'll be homegrown talent through the high school ranks, and I think it's kind of cool.
Let's talk about your ride or die. That vehicle that brings you to the Quickie Mart, that vehicle that brings you to Camp Randall, that vehicle that brings you to the card show so you can look for Travis Beckham autographed rookie cards. That is your ride or die. She gets you where you got to go. So take care of her. Go over to eBay Motors, the right parts, the right fit, the right prices. eBay Guaranteed Fit is only available to U.S. customers, but they have the hugest selection of parts. Fast, safe, simple, easy. For if you want car parts for the wheels, the engine, the radiator, everything in between the bumpers and everything on top of the car from the bottom to the top, whatever it is, north, south, east, west of the vehicle, they got you covered. Over at eBay Motors, the right parts, the right fit, the right prices. eBay Guaranteed Fit is only available to U.S. customers, but they are, again, the fastest, easiest, cheapest place to buy auto parts with the largest selection at the best prices. There's no reason not to do it. Eligible items only. Exclusions do apply. eBay Guaranteed Fit is only available to U.S. customers. Let me ask you this one. So let's zoom out big picture. We talked about Xavier a little bit. This defensive line class for 25, and you have hit it on a couple of names, is basically complete unless there's a late add. Telemak, who we've talked about, Torrin Petaway, Xavier Ukponu, who we just talked about, Nicholas Clayton, the edge rusher out of Florida. Is this a good enough defensive line class for the Badgers?
Good enough for what?
Good enough to compete at the levels that you and I talk about all the time. Is this the benchmark they need to hit in defensive line recruiting?
This is the scary part. This needs to be not necessarily the low end because it's a 4-man class, but this needs to be the lower end. And I'm not trying to be funny. Like, go look at what Texas, Georgia, Florida State, Alabama, some of those schools sign yearly at D-line. This needs to be the bottom, towards the bottom. And I know that's kind of crazy, but if you're going to compete with those schools, you got to recruit like those schools. It's still a heck of a lot better than last year's D-line class. And I think if they can, I don't know how many guys they got up front this year that they trust on the Badgers front line, but I know they're well coached.
Mm-hmm.
If they can have a pretty good year, especially getting to the QB, then you have a 26 class like this, and then all bets are off. It's kind of cool to go Wisconsin, etc. Maybe they can get a few more kids. Think about it. They got 2 Florida kids and a Texas kid. They were not getting those guys when I was growing up. I guarantee you. So,
not on the D line. Yeah, at tight end maybe, or at running back, but not on the D line.
No. I remember their breakthrough was getting Ron Dane out of New Jersey. Everybody wanted him, and he picked Wisconsin. Nobody thought they were getting him. So it's wild. If you can find a way to get that one guy to make it cool, maybe it happens. So now they need to get that one guy that kind of gets them over the top. And why not? Maybe it's an in-state kid or something, but they got to get some more of the Chicago and Detroit kids. They haven't been very successful at that yet. Getting the D linemen. There's several D linemen in Chicago next year, but Michigan and Notre Dame want them too. Georgia and Miami, Auburn, everybody's recruiting Chicago now. So they got to find a way to do it anyway. If they can put those back-to-back classes, then we can talk about competing with Ohio State and Michigan.
Who's the guy in this group, this foursome, this quartet that you think has the best chance to maybe be that guy? You talked about Ron Dane was kind of that guy that made running back cool at Wisconsin. Who's the guy here that could make defensive line cool at Wisconsin?
Probably Petaway because of his height and length. He's 285, 290, something like that now, allegedly. And he's listed at 6'5", so he's at least 6'4", I would assume. I like his film. I think he's going to grow into a power player. He's a younger guy in terms of knowing the position, knowing the sport of football. If you give him 2 years, he'll redshirt next year, play a little bit the next year after that. Like his third year, by then he should take a pretty big jump. 300-pound guys that are athletic, that are in a system that this coaching staff has. Again, I'm fully in on their defensive staff being a good staff. He could be an all Big Ten kind of guy. You need it to be cool on ESPN, on Fox, and Big Ten channel, and all those things. Hey, this kid's going to be an all-conference player. I mean, just on repeat.
Mm-hmm.
It's just almost like an election campaign because that's where recruiting's at. So I get to see some of these things that the schools send kids and these packets and stuff. When I go to the schools, I'll have this crap all over their locker and stuff. It's like an ad campaign you would see for the presidential race. It's anything that's ridiculous that you can imagine on some kind of sticker-looking thing or animated thing. It's crazy. But the kids love it. So they need that ability to say, hey, it's not we're getting there, we've done it. And it'd be cool if it's an in-state kid. I'm sure the Badger fans would love that.
Yeah, that would be a nice angle for it, for sure. All right, he is Brian Smith jumping on, telling us why we're going to beat Bama. Defense line recruiting is back in Madison. It is always good when we get Brian on. The official, he's a Locked On's recruiting insider, as always. Brian, thank you so much for tuning in, man, or jumping on, man. For everyone else tuning in, I appreciate y'all. Bunch of stuff coming up this week. We'll talk later on Wisconsin.